presented 4 scenarios for the council to review. USDA funding was the first. I used a sum of $200,000 for the purpose of the study. You only take out, you'd only sign a loan on what you actually would use for the project. The terms are 3.5% interest, or it could be less, depends on the time the loan is signed. Period can be up to 40 years, it can be paid early. You can make extra payments like we're doing at the fire station on the principal to provide the terms of the note down. I included a copy of the amortization schedule for council to review. Payments are somewhere in the neighborhood of $9,400 per year. Payments are once a year. There's a bit of a deal that they have with the Rural Water Association. That was called an interim loan program. What that helps is so that we don't have to actually, usually on USDA projects, we have to expend the fund in order to get the money back. This would help by having this interim loan. They would pay for the project as it's ongoing. USDA would come in then, buy that loan out, and then we would just have the one loan with USDA. It's fairly standard with the way that they operate this fund. In fact, they almost require you to do it this way. Other scenarios that I looked at, the rural water micro or mini loans, those are really shorter term, and the interest rates are a little bit lower, but the payments per year would be a lot higher. It's kind of a you know, a catch as to which one might be a better, the 7-year or the 15-year. Again, though, looking at the fact that the 40-year note can be paid off at any time, and the rates are competitive. Again, I think the USDA funding outweighs the rural water micro or mini loan programs. Third scenario that we talked about here in staff was to see if there's existing funds that we could use, draw down reserves again. We just really don't think that that's a good scenario for the city to consider, especially to fund a project of this amount. Final scenario would be to investigate putting the issue before the voters on a referendum. I don't recommend that either. This is not that large of a project. If you were going to build, like in Victoria when we built the hockey rink, that was like a $5 million project. Projects like that generally should go before the voters to see if they approve. My recommendation is to use the USDA funding with the interim loan funding by Minnesota Rural Water. Council should look at the total cost of the project and the payments that would come out of that loan, and work with staff to figure out a way to either accelerate payments and to mitigate the impact to the taxpayers by having a reduction somewhere else in the budget, if at all possible, so that the overall hit on an annual basis to the tax levy would be 0.
As yet, we don't have any idea about the bids or the amount of the bid or bids.
That's correct. As you'll recall, at the last meeting, council was starting to make motion, or actually had a motion on the table to put it out for bid. I just thought, again, we should make one more shot, make sure that everybody understands funding options before we go forward, rather than accept bids for the project and then not agree on how we would fund it. Let's make sure that we have an agreement or a consensus amongst the council as to how we would fund a project of this type. Now, if the project comes in much higher, you know, again, it's sort of like the Tahoe coming in less than what we thought it would be. You just wouldn't accept the bids.
What is the council's pleasure?
Any thoughts on how we would massage our budget so that this would have a 0 impact on the tax base?
I think there's a few ways. One, we would have to get aggressive with our capital improvement fund. And some projects, some vehicle purchases, for instance, might have to get stretched out a little bit longer than what we normally would do. So we would take a look at that. We would certainly take a look at the EDA, because those funds are flush. As you recall, we had taken quite a bit out of those as far as the amount that we were gonna levy for this year. That was the last place we went to. Because there are some considerable amounts of money in those funds. However, one large project that comes in that we need to entice or make some improvements in order to make the project happen, those funds could go down rather quickly. So we always have to keep an eye on that. But those funds are fairly robust. Those would be a couple of the easier areas that I think we would take a look at. But I would ask the staff to take a look in all of the budgets and see how we can try to figure that out. One of the areas that I would be concerned about touching is the street improvement for paving and for seal coating and crack filling. We want to make sure that we keep those budgets fairly well intact so that we can maintain the streets that we have right now and repair the ones that need to be repaired. So that would be one area that I don't think we would want to touch. But much like the issue at the federal level, do we raise taxes or we cut spending? I think the answer is probably a little bit of both. And so it may come at some point, it will come at some point where maybe this council, but certainly future councils will have to look at that as a scenario. We can't keep holding the line to zero. Can't keep cutting because our costs keep going up. Fuel costs keep going up. Vehicle costs are going up. You eventually reach a tipping point where you can't economize anymore. When that point is, of course, no one knows. We have to continue to squeeze a turnip, get the blood out of it, but sometimes there's nothing left but the turnip.
Is there any problem with a USDA loan if you apply for, I don't assume there is, but if you apply for $200,000 and only use $100,000?
No, you'll only execute the loan on what you take.
Okay.
So if bids came back and it was 120, and we spent 120, then that's what the loan would be. Although if it's much less than that, we may want to look at a different scenario. We may then want to try to figure out a different way of doing it and not use a loan, or take the loan and pay it off really quickly.
And is there a minimum on USDA for years?
No.
There's no early payment
No.
at any time?
No. The rural water ones do have a minimum. One has a 5-year and the other one I think is a 3-year minimum. Or you pay a...
Micro, that was a 10-year, I think.
Yeah, but there's a 5-year early out. You have to at least go to 5 years, then you pay a penalty, but you can't get out before 10.
What about the requirements? Which of these funding sources or whatever would force us to use the more stringent federal bidding process?
I checked on that, and because we're not falling under the original funding request from USDA for what was it, 2.2 million for the original library project. That one was, because it was the federal dollars, that was the one that had to follow Davis-Bacon and some of the others. This one does not. Those restrictions are not the same on this. So I was incorrect in assuming that there was a different bidding requirement. It's not on this fund. So either way we go with any of these, we wouldn't be held to that standard. Which again makes it a little easier for local contractors to bid on these projects, which is the intent of these smaller loans.